Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It is Tuesday, August 22nd, 27th. First of all, let me apologize for not getting the video of yesterday out fairly on time. It was done, but I usually take and I do all the editing here at the house, and then I upload it, and by the time I get to the shop and get some stuff done, it's ready to go public, all right? It's all uploaded. Well, yesterday, I had a wagon that I buried down in the back meadow with a load of hay on it. I told Claude, let's go get that first. Just take the big tractor down. And then we noticed that the cows were across the road from the house looking for their grain. And I had a friend of mine that had bought two of my breeding size Angus heifers a week ago, and we're starting to get antsy. So I said, well, I planned on doing it Wednesday if I had more help. But I said, I already had the cattle trailer backed up. Let me see if we could, just the two of us can get them on. Well, after about an hour and 20 minutes, we finally coaxed the two up in. And we called him, and he said, because he was at work, and he says, look, I run the shop. He says, I'll meet you there. When are you going to leave? I said, we're leaving right now then. So we took right off with the cattle trailer, and he's tickled right to death. I'm tickled to death because I know they went to a good home. He's going to use them for mama cows for years to come. And then we had to go do some pickups. By then I had forgot. And then I remembered I didn't upload, so I grabbed my phone. Well, my phone was dead because it hadn't been on the charger in 2 days. So once we got back to the shop, I uploaded it quick. Did we get the wagon out? No. That was my fault. We should have only put 5 bales on that, and I put 14. So what's today's video going to be on? I thought about this for the past couple weeks, and it comes and goes, right? I wrote a paper on it in college about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. and why it was important. At the time, I wrote a paper of why it was decimating the U.S. by what big corporations were doing by shipping the jobs overseas and to Mexico, India, outside the country. All right. And this isn't something that just happened overnight. This has been going on for a long time. And the key points that I brought up in my letter, was stakeholders. What are you doing to your stakeholders? Well, you have to define what a stakeholder is, right? Stay tuned. Alrighty, welcome back. My name is Eric, and yes, this is the weekday, Monday through Friday. Today is Tuesday, the 27th of August of 2024. So we're talking about bringing everything back to the U.S. What is that going to mean to us in general, right? And, well, they say, well, it's going to raise prices. Okay. See, when you take jobs and you take them away from one area and you put them in another area, what tends to happen is the area that you're pulling them from, unless there's enough good paying jobs to absorb those people, the economy tanks, okay? And the place that you're going to, where you think that there's plenty of, people willing to work, their cost of living, their median income goes up. But why would you do that, right? Let's say you're doing it from state to state, New York to Illinois. Why? What would happen like in that situation? Well, most corporations, the top HR, that's what they are, CEOs and CFOs, and they're there to make money for the company. But see, a good CEO looks at what's good for the stakeholders. And a stakeholder can be anything from someone that owns stock, shares in the company, employees, customers that buy the products, and suppliers that supply those needs to these companies. So what ends up happening with these corporations and these bigger, even, they don't have to be corps, it could be, just businesses, is they take from this labor pool that now maybe the cost of per hour has gotten up to, let's say $45 an hour is what they're getting in New York. But if they move that same business to Illinois and hire on all new people to take the jobs from the people that were over here, first of all, it could be a non-union shop, so now there's no wage control. So they're paying less to their employees, but it's still big money to their employees for that area that wages have been stagnant for a long time. So it brings an influx of money. And what happens with an influx of money? Other businesses around flourish because now people are spending money. People do not hold on to all their money, folks. They spend it. So the more they make, the more they spend. All right? And they spend it on bigger toys. What can I tell you? More lavish vacations. Bigger diamond rings. But they end up spending it back into the local economy. So you can see how bad of a move it would be just from one state to the next, right? Because now the wages go down, but yet the wages are up considerably compared to what the medium wages are in that area in Illinois compared to New York. And a lot of times, the rules and regulations that are taking place in New York, a business has to jump through so many hoops that it's hard to stay in business and do it correctly, the way the state wants you to do it, right? So the other thing that businesses look at is what are the regulations and restrictions on us? And maybe Illinois has very few in that area, right? So that's another reason a business will be willing to transfer and move from one state to the next. And Remington did just that here to us here in New York. They had been here for over 200 years. And finally, enough was enough. They saw the writing on the wall. They saw that New York was one of those states that was going to sue the asses off their company for every time something happened with a Remington firearm. And I think they would have gone sooner, except for during COVID, like just pre-COVID into COVID. They were planning that move. And New York stepped in and basically gave them exclusive contracts to ammunition for all their police departments and all this other stuff for New York. Okay? Guns and ammo. Or Remington would have been gone sooner than it had gone, right? They got bought out. And they didn't want to leave. They've been here for 200 years. They didn't want to leave their employees. And I think they offered all their employees a chance to move with them. So they didn't. They weren't doing this to get rid of their employees. But by taking Remington Arms out of that area, now they dropped the medium income down because they were no longer a good paying job in that area. Everything was good for Remington except for its stakeholders, and that was its employees. A lot of times people don't think of that employees are a very important part of a business. They are the key business. Without skilled employees, you have nothing. You're a one-man band. If you want to be a CEO of yourself, knock yourself out. But most businesses, and I'll tell you, this is the clinker. It's like with Remington. Most of the people that were employed there deer hunted, and had guns for personal safety and this and that. They bought Remington. They knew quality because they were doing quality work. You don't stay in business 200 years by doing shoddy work, all right? And it kind of saddened me when I heard the news that Remington was leaving New York after 200 years. But they were put in a position of a no-win. If we stay, we could get sued and the company would have to fold by its own state. It had supply lines set up for suppliers. It had everything right where it was at. Everything it needed. But because of certain things, regulations, they were forced to go. So that's kind of like what you're seeing with these other companies that we talked about, John Deere last week. And whether you agree or disagree, you can understand what's going on, except for there's a little bit of I don't know, it makes you pissed, right? You got a company that's making billions of dollars, and it decides it's going to shut down and move to Mexico. All right, how many billions of dollars do you need to make? That's my question. How many billions of dollars a year do you as a corporation need to make your stockholders happy? Because you're not thinking of shareholders, right? You're not thinking of your employees. From what I understand. You're not thinking of your suppliers. Again, from what I understand. And you're not thinking about your customers. And they can come back and tell me, well, look, the wages were too high. We couldn't afford to keep paying that kind of money. Our supply chains were being screwed because during COVID we found out that we couldn't rely on China for our parts and stuff to assemble in the U.S. So we're going to move that to Mexico. All right, so move the manufacturing from China to Mexico, and then the assembly in Illinois alone. Why couldn't you have done that? Because moving it from China to Mexico, I think would have cost more per hour and have a few more regulations in effect. See, it's not a bad thing to have some manufacturing outside the U.S., but in the end, we need to. I'm sorry, I'm for open market. I'm a capitalist, but to what extent? And that is the extent of you're taking care of your employees, you're taking care of your customers, you're taking care of your suppliers, and you're taking care of your people that own stock in your company if it's a stock corporation. Because I can remember when a lot of this stuff was going on, people were complaining, but I said, it's your 401k that's bought shares of their stock, and they're trying to make money for you through 401k. So if they're making more money, then you make more money, right? So a lot of the shareholders, the ones that had stock in those companies, kept quiet because they were making record profits compared to a 3 to 5% yearly. Some of them were making 100% yearly. And also during that time, you saw the disparage of income between the upper people in the business and the middle and the lower. Your top, your CEO, your president, and your CFO were making millions. The distance of wages between what your upper people were making and what your employees are on the floor doing the work went like this. Okay? So they started incentivizing the ones up here, the ones that are willing to do anything for a buck, to get them where they can make the most money. And they did. They did exactly what shareholders asked them to do. Again, investors, the people behind the company. The other thing that's always been a pet peeve of mine, I don't think any medication that's given to a U.S. citizen here in the U.S. should be made outside the U.S. Period. You have all these drugs pouring across the southern border, fentanyl. It's coming across our border up here in Canada. But you got fentanyl, you got cocaine, you got heroin, you got crack, amphetamines. Who's to say somebody wouldn't tamper with our supply chain of medications in other countries? Or, worse yet, have them not have the potency that the insulin now is just watered down something. And you could kill people that way. What is your take on all this? I mean, I'm not for, not doing business around the world, but I am for taking care of our own people first. And let's say we decided to move a lot of the manufacturing back to the U.S. What would happen? We are so far advanced now with robotics, okay? Robotics would take care of a lot of, they would save the companies a lot of money if it was done with robotics. What else would happen if we moved it back? Well, we'd have a better quality control in effect because we have regulations that have certain things that, you can't make a product that kills people. Now, I don't mean intentionally, but I mean, if you make a medication and it's not the right medication and it gets packaged wrong, then, sorry, you're holding the bag. Supply chains. It would shorten the time between what they needed for stuff if that stuff was being manufactured here as well. And by doing so, every able-bodied U.S. citizen that wanted to work would be working. I know there's a lot of help wanted signs right now, but let's honestly look at it. It's our fault because it's generational. We tried to make it easier on the next group and now We have some people that don't want to work. Okay. But would that be a bad thing if we brought that back? If John Deere stayed here in the U.S. and only dealt with suppliers here in the U.S., if John Deere had decided that they were only going to buy from, or that they needed a supplier of their parts, I guarantee you there'd been a manufacturing plant built somewhere within a state or two from where their Illinois plant was to supply them with whatever they needed, or have sister plants making different parts. We don't have quality control anymore. My brother-in-law, he used to go overseas to China and every so often check on the quality. And he said if you didn't, you would find them melting down bicycles to try to make a part that couldn't afford to not function and work correctly. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. But it's something to give thought to, right? And the other thing I want you to think about is what person that wants to be, president of the U.S. of A., which one is looking at bringing manufacturing back and which one is willing to sell out the U.S.? Simple as that. You can think what you want, but in the end, we need to have someone leading the charge that is thinking of us here in the U.S. first. It's no different than a parent with their children. If you're not going to think of your child first, what kind of parent are you? Give me some feedback on what you think and what you feel, where we're headed right now. And, this wasn't done overnight. This was I can remember when the companies first started moving out. It was over 20 years ago to go overseas because they had cheap labor, very few regulations, and they had record profits when they brought it back in container ships, the product, versus manufacturing here in the U.S. Now, if we manufacture everything here in the U.S. and we build everything here in the U.S. for U.S. citizens, and we bring all of our pharmaceuticals back, manufacturing of that product. Now, my idea with the pharmaceuticals are the company hasn't got to be U.S. only, right? So if you want to sell to a U.S. citizen here in the U.S., then that has to be made here in the U.S. If you want to offer it to third world countries like Mexico, you could put a sister plant in Mexico, and the drugs that are made there are for anywhere outside the U.S. You can't bring those in. You can't. Pharmaceuticals made billions of dollars too. And they're still making record profits. Again, I'm business. But I've always looked at my shareholders, and that's my employees, my investors, my customers, and my suppliers. So on that note, you guys have a great Tuesday. I'll get this video up right now. It is 20 to 6, so I'll have it up by 7. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.